You're listening to the Passion for the Paranormal podcast with Curry Stegan, now with weekly episodes. Now sit back, relax, and free your mind and let Curry take you on a journey into the paranormal, the bizarre, and unexplained. And don't forget to subscribe to him on Apple or Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And now, here's your host, Curry Stegan.
Well, greetings, fellow truth seekers, and welcome to another episode of Passion for the Paranormal, bringing a passion for the paranormal to you. As always, it's really good to be back here with you once again. I'm really excited to welcome my next guest. His name is Marc D'Antonio, and Marc is a noted astronomer and scientist with a keen interest in the UFO subject. He's been working with MUFON for a number of years, and he's going to be doing a first ever live streaming event at this year's largest UFO conference in the world, Contact in the Desert. So real great to have Marc joining me. I'm really excited about that. My book, Walking in the Shadows of Strangers, My Journey into the Paranormal, is available through Amazon. And you can also go to my website at passion4theparanormal.com. And there you can find a link to order a copy. You can order either a paperback copy or you can get the Kindle version. If you have a Kindle Unlimited account, you can get a free copy of the book. So hopefully you'll check out the book. And if you'd like to be a guest on the show, you can also go to the website and fill out the questionnaire there. You can sign up for our newsletter, catch up with past episodes. So hopefully you'll visit us at the website. And real eager to talk with Marc and pick his brain about how he got involved in the UFO subject. And really think you're going to enjoy tonight's show. And thank you so much for tuning into the show. Okay, so joining me tonight is Marc D'Antonio. And Marc is a notable astronomer. He is director of SkyTour LiveStream Observatories, CEO of FX Models, a model making and special effects company specializing in digital physical models and organic special effects in the film industry. And he is also the Mutual UFO Network's chief photo video analyst. Marc will be doing a never-before-seen presentation at this year's Contact in the Desert event. This is a live streaming event from a remote observatory in the Arizona desert, where he will showcase amazing objects in the sky. Marc has appeared on a number of networks, including programs on CNN, Discovery, SciFy, History, NATGEO, and Science Channels, performing on-camera work in his role as a UFO investigator, scientific presenter, and photo video analyst, and he is also author of the book, The Populated Universe. Marc, thank you so much for joining me tonight.
I have to say, when I first started this stuff, my bio was one line. Okay. And over time, stuff kept adding on, and you lose sight of it. You lose track of just what kinds of stuff you've actually done. And when I hear people read it, it's like I'm kind of embarrassed. It's like, oh man, that's not really me. Is it me? Did I do all that? And yeah, I mean, it just sort of creeps up and sneaks up on you. It's nice to be here, Curry, and thank you for having me on, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. That's quite an impressive resume. And you're a scientist, you're an astronomer. So how does someone who, like yourself, who's a scientist and astronomer, how do you get involved with MUFON and into the topic of UFOs as a scientist?
Well, that's a really good question. And it goes all the way back to when I was getting my degree in astronomy. I was arguing with not arguing, but having a discussion, a spirited discussion. And I don't know if you have video or not. Are we doing video here, by the way? I'm just curious.
Yeah, this is just audio only.
Oh, it is audio. Okay. Because I had a spirited discussion with the director of my observatory, and I said to him that I believe it's a populated universe. I said that, and this was back when I was getting my degree in the 80s. Like, yes, I'm older. Yeah, not really, but old enough. And he said to me, "Well, what are you talking about?" I said, "Well, look at us. We're carbon-based life forms. Carbon is the fourth most abundant element in the universe. If there's going to be life out there, it's going to stand to reason that it's probably going to be based on carbon, like we are, and like every other life form on this planet has ever been and ever will be." Okay. So he's nodding, and he was a heavy set guy with suspenders, which is funny. You can imagine the type. And looking at me over the top of his glasses as I'm talking to him. And I said, "And we're bilaterally symmetric. We're the same on the left as on the right. Every life form on this planet, every single one has symmetry of some kind. So that symmetry is something that I think is a template that the universe provides for. And so is DNA. DNA has to be some type of template based on the carbon, the hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, phosphorus, and sulfur, chomps by any other name. Okay. And that DNA pattern, that DNA type, is different for every life form on our planet. So I think it's got to be a template. And that was way back decades ago. And he looked at me over the top of his glasses and he says, "Are you finished?" I go, "Yes, sir." He goes, "Well, get back in the observatory, get back in your research, and leave Captain Kirk to us." It's like, okay, well, I got your point. I got his point. But that phrase, which I came up with on that spot, the populated universe, stuck with me. And I've always wondered whether there was life out there ever since I was 9 years old. When I was 9, I received the gift of a telescope. And I was inseparable from that telescope. I'd have it out every night looking at the sky. I'd look at stars, sometimes look at a cluster of stars and just stare at them for maybe a half hour. And as a 9-year-old, that's a long time, to do that as a 9-year-old.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
I started to think, Curry, that maybe there's something more up there. Maybe there's other people like us looking back at me. And I thought, well, I've seen too much Star Trek and that kind of thing. Because Star Trek, actually, with William Shatner, had just started airing on TV on prime time at that point. And I was just really intrigued, enthralled, and excited by the prospect of life in the universe. So I began to think that maybe that's a possibility. And so I started looking for clues, and that led me to 2 years later, when I was 11 years old, led me to the Midwest UFO Network, later to become the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON. And so I had asked my mother to send a little postcard in and start my subscription. And I started getting the MUFON Journal, which at that time was just stapled mimeographed pages with the purple ink that smelled strange, and that's the stuff that I lived on and just kept going after and reading and couldn't get enough of. So I ended up looking to the sky for a lot of answers. And then I began to think, the oceans are another place. The oceans are very, very important because life began in the oceans, according to library books I've been reading. This at age 11. Okay. And so I started taking it from there. And from that point forward, I knew I was going to be an astronomer. I never wavered. I never changed. And so I guess in a sense, I was the ultimate nerd, the ultimate geek. Okay. I decided by age 9, I knew I was thinking I'd be an astronomer. And a couple years later, I was certain I was going to be an astronomer. And I could barely say the word, when I was 9. But I knew that I would be an astronomer and study the universe because I wanted to know if there was life out there. And so that began my long journey in the study of unidentified flying objects as potential spacecraft from other worlds. And of course, I was drawn to science fiction and all that stuff, of course, because that's part and parcel to what makes up someone who's excited about life in the universe. And so I joined the Midwest UFO Network, or MUFON, at that time. It was Midwest. 2 years after it formed. And as of now in 2023, I've been their chief photo and video analyst since 2008. And it's very interesting, very rewarding. And when you get that kind of attention for being someone in the field that long, opportunities come along, right? And so, yes, I've got a lot of shows I've done, but it's hard because sometimes they twist your words and make it into something you don't necessarily ever want to hear again because it's embarrassing. And there've been a few shows like that. But the one I'm involved with now on History Channel called The Proof Is Out There, okay, that one is by far one of the more level-headed, properly produced shows that I've ever participated in. I find it to be just a really, really good blend of storytelling, excitement, and intrigue. I really do. So, and yes, I guess that's kind of a pitch for it, but to be honest, it's because it really is that good. It really is such a good show. And again, I didn't go into this field thinking that's where I was going to go, but I was pleased to see that people want to hear what's being said out there by a lot of people in the UFO arena. And the government is now come forward, and the government is saying things like, hey, it looks to me like, there might be something unknown out there, and we're finally admitting it. And that is a huge admission, huge admission by the U.S. government that has so far and up to that point remained steadfastly secretive about what's going on. So that's where it is, and that's why I joined got into that field. That's why I became an astronomer, because there's life out there, and I know there is, and that's what the book's about.
Yeah, I wanted to, as you talked about, we had the December 2017 videos that were released, and perhaps that's opened a lot of people's eyes. I think I followed the UFO subject for well over 20 years.
Yeah.
Kind of did it quietly in my military career a bit, but I think in one sense, I'm encouraged by it. And in another sense, another side of me is saying there's so much more out there that's been going on for years. There's eyewitnesses out there, people like Robert Salas, who have actually come forward, and many others, that it's kind of like, we drew this line and we said 2017 December, the government said, okay, now we're kind of paying attention to it, or at least that's what they kind of lead you to believe. What do you kind of, what's kind of your view on that? Because there's a lot of people that have come forward over the years and talked about the subject, and now it's kind of like, now they're just bringing it to light.
Yeah, you're gonna find that, especially in the armed services, people always have a boss over their heads, and they usually have to check with someone over their head before they can do things, almost anything. Everything is regimented. So it's understood why people in the field will say nothing. They're not trying to keep the secret from the American people. They're actually trying to just follow their orders. And so, and for instance, I was on a U.S. submarine as a guest decades ago. Decades now, that's plural, just so you know. And in the sonar, they had something come ripping through there, and they called it a fast mover. Now, there's a whole story that I normally tell about that, but I'm sure it's out there, and people listening to this are probably saying, oh, I know that story. I remember hearing them say that. And so it was moving several hundred knots through the water, and nothing on Earth that we have moves several hundred knots whisper quiet through the water, but this did. And the kid on the sonar didn't know what to do with it, and he basically held his hands out, and even though he was facing away from me, talking to the executive officer, the XO, who was on his far side, and I was sitting right next to the kid at the sonar station, just that was not active, and I was just trying to get my stomach back because I was seasick. Because when the boat's on the surface, it rocks like a what. but underwater, it feels like where you're sitting now. You can't tell it's really moving. So once we were underwater, it was calming. So I was able to start getting rid of my seasickness. And the kid was asked the bearing and the range of this thing that he called up to the con on. And he said something, but I couldn't hear it because it's really noisy on a sub. You've got people talking, you got air, you've got sounds of machinery. And those sounds never get out of the sub. That's the pride of the Navy. And so I didn't hear the bearing and the range. But the executive officer said, "What's the speed?" And the kid was incredulous and held his hands out like he didn't know what to do. And the reason he did that is because he didn't know what to do. And he said, "Several hundred knots, sir." And the executive officer said, "Okay." And he turns to the kid and said, "Hey, okay." He said, "Okay, log it and dog it." And the kid said, "Sir, yes, sir," and turned back to the console, ready to go on. Didn't bat an eyelash. It was over. And I got up and I went over to the XO and I said, "Oh, sir, excuse me. Thank you so much for inviting me on the boat to go for this trip. Is there anything I can help you with? Because I understand what these fast movers may be. Is there anything I can help you with?" He looks at me and he squints. He goes, "D'Antonio, right?" I go, "Yes, sir." He says, "You having a good trip?" "Yes, I am." He goes, "Let's keep it that way." And he walks away. Okay. Now, fast forward that about 6 years. I had to do a job for the Joint Chiefs because it was actually office of the presidential model. I had to make a presidential display model for a program. Well, anyway, I did it. I went down there and I was sitting with one of the chiefs and I said to him, "What can you tell me about the fast mover program, sir?" And he could have said, "What the hell's that?" Or he could have said, "Arrest this man," or whatever, but he didn't. He looked at me because we had worked together, on this project. And he goes, "Oh, I can't talk about that program, Mark. I'm sorry." I was like, "Oh, okay. That means it's real. Holy God, this is real."
Yeah, he just
And
confirmed it for
he
you.
confirmed it without even admitting anything. And it was, it stunned me. And that set the stage. And I know I tell that story a lot, and I do because it still stuns me to this day. And now the military's catching up, and the air wings on carriers are catching up. People that are running radars and sonar systems on cruisers and submarines are catching up. I've had submariners come to me and say, "We've seen those on our ship, on our boat too, and we classified them as jellyfish." I went, "Jellyfish?" "Yeah." He goes, "Then what else are we gonna do? What else are we gonna do?" And the reason that the military doesn't have any problem with these things is because to date they've shown no indication of a threat. And so they are uncomfortable with them. So the mission is to observe and report, and that's it. Do not engage, because we can't engage, and we don't know what would happen if we did. So they're very strange. I think that they're here, and my reason is not just for that, but for other reasons. I also think that they go where we are not, and where we are not is in the deep ocean. And so I think that's where they are, if you want to say setting up a base, like we set up a base on the moon or on Mars someday. They are in the deep ocean, and that's where they are centered because we're not down there. And when we do go to the ocean, to go deep in the ocean, it's with great fanfare. We have a ship on the surface tooling around, making lots of noise. It drops a submersible over the side. The submersible goes down either on its own or tethered. And that stands out like a sore thumb. Any technology sufficiently advanced from ours would be able to detect every single thing going on in the oceans. Our sonars on submarines can hear whales farting, to be blunt, okay, miles and miles and miles away. All right, so it's not like we can't see some really incredible things. We can hear earthquakes from a continent away in our submarines. We can hear noises of ship propellers from hundreds of miles away. And it just goes on and on. So in other words, the transmission of sound underwater is legendary. It's more efficient than through air. So we can do that. So an advanced civilization, and it doesn't even have to be that advanced, Curry. It can maybe just be 150 years ahead of us or 1,000 years ahead of us. but most likely they're tens of thousands of years ahead of us. And a civilization like that would very easily be able to lift the veil of the ocean in a way that allows them to know what's going on almost everywhere at once, potentially, with technology. And so there's a lot of additional possibilities associated with this phenomenon. So we're just uncovering it in our military, and they have uncovered it for sure, the advanced technologies. And all that stands between us and them is their technology. And we're catching up.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, because I've had conversations with people, and some are technical people, and conversation, about UFOs, and about the possibility of them visiting us. I've heard the argument before that it's absolutely impossible for those, if you want to call them extraterrestrials, interdimensional beings, whatever we're going to classify them as, it's almost impossible for them to travel those vast distances in space.
And you're right, it is. So you'll ask, well, how do they do it then? And that answer is my other lecture that I'm going to give at Contact. I've been giving this one all over the country. And that has to do with, it has to do with the potential that string theory is an actual concept that's in play in the universe. And it has to do with fundamental forces, right? We have the weak and strong force. We have the electromagnetic force, light and so forth. And we have gravity. Now, there's ways that we can use gravity, or I should say, will be able to use gravity, that will allow us to literally shift out of our 4 dimensions, our X, Y, and Z moving through time. This isn't some crackpot sci-fi idea. This is an idea posited by an aerospace engineer named Robert Schroeder, good friend of mine, and that other physicists in the country and the world have fallen in line with, because they think that it makes sense. It's an interdimensional travel, and it focuses on a variation of string theory. There, as you can imagine, there's many variations of theories. Well, one of the variations is called Randall-Sundrum 1, RS1. And the RS1 variation would allow for travel because you could shield your ship with particles that live outside of those 4 dimensions, X, Y, and Z moving through time, which is where we all live. And that 5th dimension that you'd be in is it has a name of its own. It's called the bulk, bulk, like bulk produce or whatever. And if your ship is surrounded by particles that actually are more comfortable and live in the bulk, which you can generate with just as little as a fusion reactor, you can then generate a sheath around your ship, and those particles will draw you and the ship into the bulk. What good is that? Well, the bulk is a highly warped dimension. In other words, as soon as you get in there, everything in the distant universe starts closing in on you and gets closer and closer and closer. The farther in you go, the closer to you it gets. So maybe you're seeing now what you can do is you can punch out of our 4 dimensions, head into this bulk, and punch back in almost anywhere else in the nearby universe. And that punch out, punch in process is the process by which I think they travel. There is no travel the vast distances between the stars. There's just a dimensional shift into the bulk and then out of the bulk. And what's interesting about that, Curry, is if you look at the physical effects that would be seen to your eye in our 4 dimensions of a ship using that technology, the ship would, number 1, it would seem to shimmer. Number 2, it might seem to change colors. Number 3, it might seem to wink out and go away. All right. Or it might seem number 4, it might seem to disappear from one spot and appear in another. All the things that are reported with UFOs are also evidence of these particles that are surrounding the ship being in play. And those particles have a special name. They're called Kaluza-Klein particles, or Kaluza-Klein gravitons. Remember, everything in our fundamental forces, we can illustrate the forces with waves and particles. We have wave equations, and we have particle equations. And so the only one that we really can't penetrate, okay, we know the duality of light. Light is a photon, a particle, and it's also a wave, right? A dual nature. Well, gravity might be a dual nature too. And Einstein thought we'd never find gravity waves until we did. And we found gravitational waves. What we haven't found is gravitational particles. And CERN, the nuclear the nuclear people overseas, the folks at CERN, are investigating Kaluza-Klein particles now because they think they're really interesting. And I think that leads us down the path toward a potential future where we can exploit these KK particles, as they're called, to use them to travel long distances without actually traversing the distance. So that is one of the things that I think we're going to end up visiting as a race of beings on this planet. We're going to end up seeing how these particles will allow us to travel to and from places without actually traveling the intervening space.
So it's kind of like a wormhole type.
Yeah, it's actually it's not even a wormhole, and I understand everybody, and I know this, and people, and it's okay because people love the concept of the Einstein-Rosen bridge or the wormhole and think, hey, let's just use wormholes to travel. That's a great idea. And in Star Trek, we have warp conduits, and we have wormholes and things like that. But wormhole travel is a wholly different thing altogether. And it has a lot of its own problems. Not that this process I'm describing doesn't. Okay, it has problems too. But one of the interesting facts about these KK particles is that they're 10 to the 16th times stronger in the graviton range than the gravitons holding you down right now. Okay, so what does that mean? It means that they also generate micro black holes. And micro black holes are theorized to exist, and they last just a few nanoseconds. So what good are they, right? Well, they come into existence and they wink out of existence before you can even see them effectively. But if you keep generating these KK particles around your ship and you're getting these micro black holes, you're going to have a net number around your ship at any one time. And what do? I talked about those effects before about what the ship would look like it's doing. Now you'll see why. Because when those micro black holes are around your ship, they're going to pull in a little bit of the light, pull in just a tiny bit of the atmosphere briefly, right? And then wink out of existence. But if you have trillions of them doing this all at the same time, the ship was going to look like it's shimmering. The ship may pop out of existence only to come back again, depending on how many micro black holes are being generated, how many of these KK particles are being moderated in your ship. And so that process alone can explain the use of these particles can explain every visual effect we see in our 4 dimensions of a UFO. Now, yes, I'm an astronomer. I can explain how every one of those effects can also be explained by atmospheric scintillation, the autokinetic effect in the eye, and so forth. But it can't be excused that it's also possible that what we're seeing is the evidence of these KK particles in play by an advanced civilization. Now, let's go one step further. What shape are UFOs generally?
I'd
That's
say typically disc shape.
Aren't they? And you also have triangles, right?
Right.
I think I know why they're that shape. Because they're particle accelerators. The disc shape, the round shape, has an outer ring that's a particle accelerator. And what's it doing? It's generating these KK gravitons, these KK particles. And it's also, dealing with many other issues at the same time, which we can get into. And the triangular ship would be the same thing, also generating KK particles in in a ring contained within the triangle. So if you see, so flying saucers, if you want to call them that, remember that term? UFOs as a disc-shaped object match what would be needed to have a KK particle ship that's using interdimensional travel. Triangle, same thing. All right. So that and the effects we see when we have the reports of UFOs blinking out of existence or shimmering, all those things can be explained with KK particles as well. And like I said, there's other explanations, from astronomy. I can name a bunch, but we can't exclude the possibility. We can't exclude it. Now, Avi Loeb, I've done a couple of programs with Avi, and I know him, and he's at Harvard University, and he's an astrophysics chair at Harvard, right? So he isn't going to say something, for instance, that's a career killer. He's going to speak what he believes to be true. So he talks about the possibility, like the latest paper that he did with Sean Kirkpatrick. He talks about the possibility that there's a quote unquote mothership in the outer solar system that's, sending probes our way that we're seeing as UFOs. Why is he saying that? Well, he's saying that to explain a potential methodology by which they could be here. He's not saying that's what's happening. He's saying this is what they could be doing. Just like he said Oumuamua could have been a solar sail probe sent here. Because Oumuamua, many people thought it was a long, thin spindle shape, and that's actually not true. It was actually a pancake shape. It was long, it was wide and flat, is what it was. And wide and flat is very strange. There's very little evidence in the universe for an asteroid that would be like a disc shape, but this thing was kind of like that, roughly. So so his point was, and he was crucified for this wrongly, okay, all he was saying was that this is a possibility. I'm not saying this is what it is. I'm saying we can't ignore the possibilities. He is an example of an open mind, and I follow that logic. I'm an open mind. I think we have to have open minds because science can be arrogant. And I've been fighting that for decades.
Right. Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about, so you're a part of probably one of the biggest UFO conferences happening early June. That's Contact in the Desert. And you are doing something you've never done in this event before. So you're doing a live streaming event from a remote observatory in somewhere in the Arizona desert. What's happening with this? This sounds quite fascinating.
Yeah, it's called SkyTour LiveStream. So SkyTour is one word, LiveStream is one word. And SkyTour LiveStream, we started a nonprofit. It's a nonprofit organization. And we did that because we wanted to be able to bring astronomy to the masses in a way that would be memorable and that we would be supported by the community, by foundations. And we're nowhere near that yet. But because we just became a 501c3. Well, nonprofit. Well, I started because I wanted to have a remote observatory because it gets cold. I'm in Connecticut. And so I had a real dome on my front lawn. It was the talk of the town, okay? Because everybody that drove by saw a big dome on the front lawn of my yard. Like, what the heck is that? Missile silo? Ha ha ha. No. And but I would be out there in the winter when it was 10 degrees and I'd be streaming to the world. And I was also shivering to the world. And when I would come in, my hands would be blue. I actually had some minor frostbite a couple times. But the thing was, I said, I got to automate this. I have to control this remotely. So I started working out ways to control a telescope from long distance. At first, I used Wi-Fi from my house out to the dome, 75 feet away. And it worked okay. It was kind of cool. I had cameras in there so I could see what it was doing. But then I realized that's not robust enough. I mean, I want a telescope all the way across the country out in the middle of the Sonoran Desert where the sky is so dark and so clear that you can't even see your hand in front of your face. And to do that, I contacted Marianne Robb and Tara Diulis, who are a police officer and an artist, respectively, out in Arizona. They were friends of mine. And I talked to them about this potential project. And I also had a good friend who owns land out there, a former Lawrence Livermore scientist and his wife. And they were amazingly gracious enough to say, "Hey, you want to put an observatory on our land? Have at it. We'll go in. We'll get into it with you." We did. And so we have an instrument out there. And if this was video, I could actually show it to you because I have it active right now. On one screen, I have the observatory feed right now, and on the other screen, I have us, you and I. But
hey, Mark, I
yeah,
apologize to cut you off. We're going to need to go to a break for a minute here, and then we'll pick it back up
all right.
right when we get back. Okay, so we're back. Was just asking you, Mark, about the live stream event happening. I guess this is the first going on at Contact in the Desert, and you just started to talk about that. So maybe if you just kind of want to pick up where you left on that.
Sure. We built these remote telescopes. We have two of them now, with a third one coming in the next couple months. So three different buildings, actually. Two in Arizona, one here in Connecticut. And it's my feeling is that science is for everyone, Curry. So it's just a matter of potentially hearing the right way to describe some things that might be strange to you, that might otherwise keep you at arm's length. So when people talk about black holes, they say, "Oh, I can't." Well, whatever that is, they suck. Ha ha ha. I make a joke, but then it's about as much as they do. But if we talk about it, we show a galaxy that has a massive black hole at its center, and we talk about the black hole. So we kind of joke around and say, if you're not careful, you'll learn something. But when we do this, people see the telescope in the building, they see me in the corner, they see the main screen, and we're showing them things in the night sky that they would never get to see without a telescope. Not only that, they see them in seconds. Not the many minutes it takes. When people do astrophotography, they take like hours of photography of one thing to get a beautiful shot of it. We take a 20-second or 30-second shot, and people see it and they go, "Wow, look at that nebula with all that intricate patterning of dark and light gas, and that's actually glowing. And how do you get all that?" Right? So it's a matter of a telescope that we're using, that we actually added a special set of optics to this telescope that makes it 25 times faster than it was off the shelf, so to speak. And that gives us the ability to do very, very short exposures with an extraordinarily good dedicated astronomy camera just for astronomy through a telescope. And what we've ended up with is by far some of the most beautiful objects, things I've never seen before, that just pop out and just they're there for all to see. And then we sit there and tell people about them, tell them how they originated. And we'll see, on an average night, we'll see anywhere between 5 to 8 to sometimes more, 12 to 15 different objects, and every one of those objects, people can come up and get on our free server. They can see the photos they just saw that were breathtaking in front of their eyes and go get that photo at no charge and download it. And, so we give them access to the server online, and they can just go and grab anything they want. And there's a pay option. If people want to go through a paywall, they can get some of the final process shots, which would be suitable for framing and, blowing up to such size as making wallpaper even. People have taken our stuff and made them into bedspreads and mouse pads and framed pictures under glass. It's amazing. We have lamps with the shade has like our stuff on it. And, we have, imagine a floor lamp that's sitting up there and you've got a big nebula on it, it's just stunning. And the colors are astonishing. So it's kind of neat that people can get this involved with astronomy, but never have to go through the expense of owning a telescope to do it.
Yeah, it sounds like it's going to be a remarkable event, and sounds like it's going to be a first. Now, Mark, you've been doing this, been involved in astronomy for a very, very long time, looking to the sky. As a result of that, have you seen anomalous craft objects in the sky that you haven't been able to explain in all the years you've been looking to the skies and looking at these objects out in space?
Yeah, Curry, I have, and to be honest, we capture. See, one of the other scopes or cameras we have at the site is what's called an all sky cam. It sees 360 degrees around, 180 degrees all at once. And so what we do is we can use that camera to get a look at the entire night sky. And what I've done is I can run it all night long. And in the morning, I make a video. And in the video, you watch the whole sky pass over you all night long from dusk to sunrise. And it's really pretty, and it makes a beautiful video if you put it to music or something. But on one particular one, I caught something I can't explain. There was a circular path way up high in the sky, and I couldn't explain what the circular path was. Nobody could. And it was a half circle on the first frame, and then the rest of the circle on the next frame. And the frames were 24 seconds each. It was really odd. So, and that's something right in our skies. And this is an area that's well known for having oddities in the night sky, without a doubt.
Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. And I can only imagine when you're looking in the sky that often, you're going to eventually, I would think, see something anomalous. I want to talk about your work with MUFON. You've obviously did a lot of video analysis, photo analysis with MUFON over the years.
Yeah.
Are you often, so I'm assuming that you're looking at certain cases, you're researching and you're doing analysis, video and photo analysis for them. Are you often finding prosaic explanations once you do the analysis for a lot of these?
Yeah, for 90% of these, 99% actually, the explanations are actually pretty straightforward. Ordinary things caught in an extraordinary way is usually what I see. And so that's the kind of thing that you would expect to see. I see that happen all the time. And it's sad. I mean, oh man, I go into it with an open mind, but knowing full well that most likely we're going to catch something that is ordinary, but in an ordinary object captured in an extraordinary way. And that's kind of what we see many times,
Right. And so of those 1%,
Yeah.
are they still to this? So you get 99% of them there. There's prosaic explanations for them. What about the other 1%? What happens with those?
Well, it's actually 99.8 or 9% are prosaic, to be fair. And those others that are left behind, well, there's a couple of reasons that they could be left behind and not understood. And that could be, number one, because we didn't have enough data, or number two, because they were true UFOs, and but erring on the side of the fact that it might be that there's not enough data. Well, that could also be what's going on, but still, it makes a great deal of sense to consider that there's a possibility that, and again, just like with Avi Loeb's open-mindedness, we have an open mind as well. And we would say, hey, it's possible that this is something truly remarkable.
Yeah. And those are the ones that even if it's just a few, if they're
It only takes one.
Yeah.
It only takes one, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Well, Mark, hey, I really appreciate you joining me tonight. Can you talk before we finish up here? Talk a little bit about Contact in the Desert. Are you selling tickets for in-person and virtual? How's this event unfolding this year?
That's a question for the organizers. Believe it or not, this is the very first time I've ever been invited to Contact. And so I'm looking forward to doing it. And I'm doing two things. I'm going to be doing a talk, a regular talk, and it's going to be, and that talk's going to be called Yes, They Are Here. And it talks about And in layman's terms, it's going to explain this string theory proposition for travel, which would allow them to travel interdimensionally and be here easily once you have the technology. And then the other one is going to be the SkyTour live observatory session. So that's going to be pretty cool. So I can't speak to, I don't know if they're doing live. I know it's in person because they're bringing me out there, but I don't know if they're doing virtual.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Well, great. Sounds like it's going to be an amazing event.
It will be.
I'm sure if you just Google Contact in the Desert, you can find anybody out there, listeners, wanting to find out more information or want to hear how they can either attend the event. I think it's more than one day, if I understand it right. I've never attended the event before. So Google Contact in the Desert. I'm sure you can find out more information. What about more information about you, Mark? Any of the work you're doing? Where do people go?
Oh, well, if they want to find out about me, they can go to skytourlive.org and they can go to fxmodels.com. That's letter F, letter X, models, models.com. They can pick up the Populated Universe on Amazon, anywhere. And the Populated Universe is the book that I wrote that talks about planets around other stars, the possibility of life based on carbon. And basically, when you're told, when people say, I can't believe we're alone. I can't believe we're alone. What the book answers for you is, and is the question of, or the answer is, and here is why. And the book gives you the answer as to why and gives you the meat in layman's terms that you can explain. I can't believe we're alone. And here's why, because carbon is throughout the universe. It's the fourth most abundant. Oxygen is the third most abundant. And so I think that it makes a great deal of sense that there would be life elsewhere, because look at all the life here, and the book takes people through that path. So they have the armament to explain why they feel we're not alone, because everybody knows we're not alone, but try to explain it. Why? Well, because I just don't believe. You don't have to use the word believe anymore. Go from a scientific perspective. And that's what the book takes you to, but it's all written in conversational terms that everybody can understand. I have a 9-year-old reading it right now, believe it or not.
Wow. Yeah, no, and it's good that we have people in your kind of work, scientific work, that are putting this information out there, because the more credible people we have out there in the field putting this kind of information out, the more people are probably going to listen. So looks like I'm looking at the dates for the event. It looks like it's June 2nd through the 4th.
Yep.
At looks like Renaissance Hotel, Renaissance Resort, Indian Wells, California. So I'll put links to Contact in the Desert on the show notes. Mark, thank you so much for joining me. Great work you're doing, and it's been great talking with you.
Curry Stegan, it's been a wonderful opportunity to spend this time with you. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a great night, Mark.